Just think of it as the rough draft of the podcast world. This is the Newbie Writers Podcast with your hosts, Damian Boat and Catherine Bramkamp.
Hi, this is episode 152 this week, and I did get the title right this week for Google and the website. Thank you for pointing that out last week. So if anyone's confused about why there's two 152s, that was my fault. I've corrected it since then, but there is a little bit of the internet that it just likes to hold everything.
Hold all your mistakes. It's like the classic permanent record we were all afraid of when we were kids.
Yeah, so I was getting... So when the show goes out, people then share it on Twitter. And so for 2 days, people were sharing episode 152, and then you click on it and take you to 151, and then it just changed over to 151 by Wednesday. So thanks, Google. Anyway, I was just mesmerized by Garrett, that's all.
Yeah, there you go. Just distracted completely by his good looks and charm.
Yeah. And speaking of which, we've got someone else who's got good looks and charm. We've got Betsy. I'm going to mispronounce your name, I'm sure. But Betsy Fasbinder?
I'll coach you a little bit.
Come on, bring me through it. We've already been on the show.
It's Betsy Graziani Fasbinder.
Fasbinder, that's right. So welcome to the show. If you're not highly offended by me smashing your name through the park, but that's all right.
That's not the worst it's been mangled, believe me.
I'm trying to think of how to mangle that even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're a PG-rated show, so...
I have an R-rated one that I'll share with you when we're off the air.
Oh, please do.
Okay.
I like the R-rated ones. But anyway, no, you've been on our show a long time ago. For anyone that is curious to dig back through our show notes, it was last year in March, episode 73, back before we thought we'd ever get to 100.
Yeah. Betsy, you were an early adopter of our show. We appreciate that.
Ah, nice. Glad to be back. I was glad to be here then.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. What's been happening?
So yeah, here's the setup. I will set up this thing. We'll have Betsy tell us a little bit about her current projects, because that's the whole point, is to spur your books when you're on Newbie Writers. And the question that I had, Betsy just finished an audio book of Fire and Water, and many people are interested in how audiobooks are made, how they come to be, what are how do you make it all work? And since Betsy, you produced it and had your hands in this in a creative way, you were my candidate to talk about audiobooks and how to do it, and maybe give us some tips about what you've learned along the way.
Sure. Just let me know when you're ready for that.
Right now.
Just blurt it all out. Here we are.
Oh, right now? Okay. I thought we were doing other monkey business first and coming to that.
Hey,
look, right.
It's monkey business for an hour. You should know that.
Fair enough. Well, my novel is called Fire and Water. It came out a year ago, in the spring of 2013. And I thought I would just zoom along into the next writing project. But somehow, in all the feedback that I got about the novel itself, and particularly in Amazon reviews and other places, everyone kept saying, "Oh, this would make a great movie. I would love to see this as a movie." And I thought, well, from your mouth to God's ears, let's hope that happens. But I don't have a big giant pile of money to make a movie, and I don't have movie connections or talents or any of that. So I started thinking about what's the next best thing, which is an audiobook. Because what really people were saying to me, I thought, was that this book had a story that was compelling enough and should be performed in a way. So I started researching the whole idea of audiobooks and decided to do one. And there's a whole range of options we can talk about, all the way from doing it for free and turning it over to the folks at ACX, which is the long arm of Amazon, to produce and own in a way, and all of that. You can do it for almost nothing, all the way to the very expensive, where you hire a studio that does everything soup to nuts and does it for many thousands of dollars. So I was somewhere in the middle. I didn't want to relinquish all my control because I wanted to have artistic influence over the product. But I also didn't have a giant pile of money laying around to hire Hollywood specialists to do this. So I figured, well, I'll do what I did with my book. I'll find the middle route. And what I did is I retained ownership of the book and of the audio book. I found a local voice artist who was a trained actor. I didn't choose to read my book aloud because I'm not an actor. Mm-hmm. And there were accents, including an Australian accent that I knew I could not master through the book.
Oh, look, it's really easy. You just don't close your mouth.
Really tough one.
Just ask a question.
I'm sorry, darling, I didn't hear you.
You just ask a question at the end of everything, and you just don't close your mouth. Anyway.
Is that it?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's a Valley Girl thing, too.
I should have thought of calling you for coaching, Damien, but I just knew I couldn't. And the book also has elderly people, an elderly person with Parkinson's disease. It has children. It has Japanese people. It has Irish people. It has all kinds of accents. And I just didn't feel like a legitimate enough actor. I can read an accent for 10 minutes, and that's fine. But for me, 400 pages of me slopping through an accent wouldn't have worked. So I knew I needed a voice artist. So what I did is, rather than kind of do the Hollywood route, I started surveying local writers in my writers' clubs and organizations and saying, does anybody know an artist? And I got the same name about 5 times. I auditioned about 6 or 8 people, but the one that emerged was the one that was the most recommended. And then I started talking to friends who knew musicians and who had home studios. And I hired a guy with a home studio. So the 3 of us produced it together. And I was able to sit in the booth and listen to every word and coach and amend and correct if it needed to be. Although she was so good, I didn't have to do too much correcting. And I was able to feel part of the process and learn. So for me, that was the middle route.
Well,
and it ended up being a product that I'm really quite proud of.
How do you audition for that sort of thing? Do you just ring them up and say, read me the phone book?
Well, that would be an idea, but might not be too engaging. But there were different ways. There were the kind of folks that were more on the quote professional audiobook artists level, and they had websites with samples of their voice doing different kinds of things, and then you could send them, say, 10 pages, and they'd record 10 of your pages to hear it.
Right.
That was one way. And then I also had a couple people come into studio, and I'd listen to them. One of whom was perfect in terms of her voice, but she was so annoying that I knew we would drive each other insane by the end of the process, so I didn't choose her. And then there was the artist that I chose. Her name is Monica McKee, a fabulous artist and also just a lovely human being. And she was just right there to do whatever it was that I wanted to make that book successful, and also to bring the element of her talent to the story too. She read every word as I wrote it, but her interpretation made different parts of the book pop out in ways that I was surprised and delighted by.
So
that's cool.
I'm curious how you can be that annoying. Like, did she have a rider? Did she say, well, only we'll have, green M&Ms and you must have...
It was kind of like that, Damien. It was
really?
She chose to, in the first litany of things that she shared to me, it was all about her food sensitivities and how if we were to have snacks that she couldn't have this and she couldn't have that. And I thought, well, first of all, I didn't know I was your snack provider, but that was the first thing. And then she started talking to me about how, she really resents it if people call her when she's off duty. And I thought, oh, for Pete's sake, she just was too neurotic for me.
Awesome. So I hope you called her when she was off duty to say you didn't get the part. I love people like that. I just figured if I was going to spend that much time in a booth with somebody, yes,
that I had to like.
Oh, I agree, and I've been there, done that. It gets a bit sweaty and a bit annoying after a few days, but anyway.
Yeah.
So then, it takes a long time to actually, read a book word for word. Because let's face it, I try to read word for word. But when you're sitting in, lying in bed reading, you do sort of skim a little bit. Did you find it tiring at the end of each day to be sort of sitting there listening to someone just reading word for word and go, cool, well, we've only recorded 20 pages or we've only recorded 50 pages today, and then have to go back and listen to it all to make sure it gelled together?
Well, I'll tell you, Damien, that was one of the biggest learning parts of my learning process was I figured my book, I did the math on how long it takes to read 10 pages, and then I multiplied it. And I thought, well, great. So my book will be about 10 or 12 hours, depending on how fast somebody reads. And I figured, well, there's going to be some errors and some editing. So maybe it'll take 20 hours to record. Well, the reality is that and this has been borne out by some research that I've done after the fact with professionals that have done it far many more times than I, and that is that they figure for every 1 minute of recorded time in an audiobook, it actually takes 5 to 6 minutes to get it on the page or on the record.
Yes.
Because between them saying it and having to re-record, then the sound engineer having to go back and fix any sound errors or clicks or mouth noises or those things, plus any editing that has to be done by myself when I'm listening to it, if more pauses needed to be added in or any of that. And it did. It took, for a 12.5-hour book on tape, it took at least 5 times that time.
Yeah. Because I did a couple of audiobooks for Lyle at Rainstorm Press. Granted, I wasn't very good, but it was a good practice. And yeah, his books were only, they were short stories. And I think each one was about 20 pages. Can't remember now. But that took a while because when you're reading as well, you can sometimes, the mouth gets away from the brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially if you're on a flow. But even just little things like if you clear your throat, you have to stop. But the hardest thing, you've got to then make it sound like it's all one thing. I mean, if you could imagine talking for 8 hours, your voice is shattered by the end of the day.
Which is why we did it in 2-hour increments.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to tax Monica's voice. The trouble, the snag that we occasionally had with Monica is that she lives here in California, but she is originally from Texas. And if she got tired, some of the non-Texan characters suddenly sounded like they came from Texas. So, because her drawl would come out as she fatigued, and we'd have to go back in and fix and say, nope, she didn't come from Lubbock, darling. She came from San Francisco. We got to fix that. And she'd say, oh shit, and she'd go back and fix it up. Oops, I just did a PG rated thing for your
That's
podcast.
amazing.
Right.
So that, even just that, or mental lapses, or there's certain words that she pronounced very differently because of her history than somebody from, say, San Francisco might pronounce them. So it was fun playing with that and learning about it.
And then did you find it sort of frustrating, like you're sitting there and the sound guys then clicking and, recording, cutting bits and pieces out? It doesn't take it takes quite a bit of time. I mean, I find I've become I'm a bit lazy with this show. We just record it and out she goes. But there's a little bit of playing with it. But I spent my life growing up around recording studios and just listening to like a section, like a 30-second grab for an hour. You learn to not be annoyed by it after a while, I think.
Well, and it's different in an audiobook than it is, say, in this broadcast. In the broadcast, we can have some oopses and we can have some ums and we can have some random noises. But in an audiobook, you don't expect that. It's like when you go to a movie, you don't expect to see the microphone boom appear at the top of the screen, and you don't want to see a telephone pole in ancient Greece. You wouldn't tolerate that.
No.
So the same is true in an audiobook, in that they don't want to hear sounds that kind of break the trance of the audiobook. That's what you're really doing. You're trying to create a trance for people when they're listening. And so you got to eliminate all the things that are distracting. And that's why I paid the sound engineer to fix all that up and make it pretty.
But 12 hours, that's a lot of audio. Do you still, once it was done, did you go and listen to it in as big of a chunk as you can and still note down? It's like anything. You're editing like a book. Did you find small errors that, the sound guy might have just missed because he doesn't understand it?
I did. And how I saved money, frankly, because I was doing it on my budget, is that I acted as the editor in that way. And I listened to the story several times and marked different things that he had to go back and pick up, as opposed to paying him to do that. So he went in and did the technical stuff of smoothing it out, but I was the one that marked where it needed to be smoothed. And I got very fussy. And then I dared, even once it's out and it's published and it's available on Amazon and Audible and iTunes and all of that now, I actually downloaded it and listened in my car as if I was a fresh listener.
Yep.
And I was thrilled because we had done all that and it really paid off.
See, that's the key. And I do the same. It might sound a little bit sort of vain, but I listen to our show usually every Monday morning on the way to work. So I'll play it through the stereo in the van and just write. And then but it comes down to a little bit, if I find any mistakes, I think, well, it's kind of out there now. and a few hundred people have already downloaded it since this morning. Oh well, that's in there now. Or yeah, so that's why Catherine's dog's so famous.
Yeah.
Because it barked during the podcast.
Yeah, you know, he's sort of our editor.
We did have one rather pesky leaf blower neighbor.
Oh no!
Really?
Who would manage to blow leaves right during the time that we were recording every now and then. So we had to just stop and correct that. Because would you like to listen to an audiobook and all of a sudden you're hearing a leaf blower? I mean, for Pete's sake.
Not if it's set in ancient Rome. That would be a bit of a problem, wouldn't it?
But even if it's set in modern times, you don't want it.
For the crowd.
Unless it was like a Desperate Housewives thing and they're talking about the gardener and then you happen to hear a leaf blower.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you that. Sorry, Catherine, I accidentally bumped you off there.
No, go for it.
I'll tell you the best part of the whole experience for me, though, was that as many times as I have read, written, edited, re-edited, then recorded and listened and re-edited and edited and listened again, as many times as I've done that, when I listened to it in final form, sort of straight through, it felt like a brand new book to me. It felt like a new experience because it wasn't just the book that I wrote, it was the book that I wrote and then it was added to by this other artist. So it became a different thing than I had originally created just on the page, and different in the best possible way. It had more dimension to it because it was appealing to my audio senses and not just my visual. So I was really surprised that, it sounds a little braggy, I guess, but I really liked it. I really enjoyed it as a listener. And that made me feel optimistic that listeners would like it as well. If I could, as bored as I might have become with the content, if she could weave a trance for me, then I know she could do that for a listener as well. So that was really exciting. The synergy of it was very exciting. And writing is such a solitary thing that to have that collaborative experience was much more like being part of a play or a theater production. It added another kind of experience to it.
But like with anything, when you're writing, you've got your internal voice. You know how your characters want to sound, and you know, for some people, you know who you want to act in the lead role. Or whatever. Did you have a bit of that though? With when you wanted to do the audiobook, you sort of had a rough idea how you wanted it to sound in your head. I mean, you sort of have to let go a little bit. You were saying that it added a new dimension by having this other person creatively put a little bit of input into the way it's going to sound. Was that hard to overcome, or was it something you were like, yeah, this lady, she sounds just like it is in my head?
Yeah.
You know, it was exciting. Now, see, it's a little bit different than a stage production because I'm not having literally different actors play the different voices. It's one person reading it. So I couldn't expect her to sound like, I don't know, Matthew McConaughey or something.
All right.
That. But she varied her voice a lot. And she also asked me up front, what is this person like? What kind of voice do you expect? And we would sort of play with it a little bit before we started. So I had some input, but also she had some ideas that she brought that were surprising and that I really loved. There was only one time I needed to correct her, and that was that she had one character that she had a very American Southern accent for. And the character was from San Francisco, and she was intentionally doing this particular Southern accent. And when I read the text, I realized why she did it. I wrote it with idioms and things that sounded very Texan. Or very Southern, if you will. And she naturally jumped to the conclusion that that was a Texan character. And it wasn't. So that was the one correction. The only time I ever disagreed with her, I said, Alice is from San Francisco. She's not from Texas. So we had to correct that. But the rest of the time, she was brilliant. And especially my very favorite one was that, as I mentioned, I have one character who was a very elderly person with Parkinson's disease. So he has a very feathery, breathy voice that has a lilt to it in a different way. And he also happens to be Jewish and elderly. Dr. Schwartz is his name. And what she did with Dr. Schwartz was so special. She made him just amazingly real.
Interesting.
It's very fun.
But does that then, when you look back at the issue with how the character comes off the book, off the page, as more Texan than San Francisco, do you think then, does my readers think that too, that person's more Texan?
I did wonder, although really when it's in the hands of the reader, it's sort of, 'tis the great reader that makes the great book, right?
Yeah.
I've heard said. And so I sort of figure at that point, it isn't mine anymore. And they can read whatever voice they want into it. That's what I do when I read a book. And have you ever, you've read a book before and then you go and they make the movie and you think, how the heck did they cast that person? That's not who I had in my head.
Yeah.
Right.
As you read, you're always casting the roles. You're always drawing the image of what the person looks like or what their voice sounds like. And it's never going to be the same between any two readers. And I don't have a problem letting that go and letting that be in the hands of the readers. I sort of think that's their job then.
I mean,
so is that part of what you need to do with audiobooks, is to get your head around the fact that this is a changeable art, because sometimes newer writers are very set in their ways about how the book is supposed to be, how it's supposed to sound, how it's supposed to look. And when you move it into another form, be it film, be it audio, performing, I've had my poems performed and with a very different syntax and rhythm that I almost didn't recognize. It's like, oh, well, you made that sound completely different. So part of what it is then is a letting go and saying, okay, we're going to hand this to another, this is going to be another creative process, and that's not going to be exactly like the writing process. Would you say that that's what people have to do, writers have to do?
Well, I think you have to find whatever balance works for you. For me, there was first of all, choosing the right reader was a huge part of it. Because if I'd chosen somebody that was adding stuff in that was really bothersome to me, that would trouble me. So finding the right reader that would share my sensibilities, and her desire was to create the book that I intended. So she was on the same page literally with me in that way. Now, if you really, really have a super control issue about it, you should probably read it yourself if you have the abilities, because I don't know how you could make somebody else's voice come out exactly the way that you would say it if you were saying it. Yeah. I had a different piece. I had a memoir piece a short story that I wrote, and it was performed in Nevada County in California as Reader's Theater. And what was really funny to me about that particular piece was when I wrote it, it was kind of a dark, cynical little story about a woman who has transformed herself. It's called The Swan. It's this woman who was rejected by a lover in her early years, and then she inherited a bunch of money, and she went in and had herself all plastic surgery fixed and made herself into the gorgeous thing that she thought he'd wanted. And she sort of comes back to him, and he, of course, falls for her, and then she can't stand the way he looks because his nose is crooked. So that's sort of the arc of the story. But in my mind, it was sort of a dark little cynical piece. When the actor read it, people laughed. It was a comedy. She made it really funny, and she didn't change one word that I had written.
Really?
And it was just because of the tone of voice and the way she paused and the expression on her face that it made it. And I was thrilled in a way. I thought, well, how amazing that two people could say the exact same words and have a completely different tone to the whole story. It gave me some sympathy for what directors must go through when they're trying to get their actors to make the pieces they imagine it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Just to go back a little bit, I have Sharon Hamilton, who's been on our show, and I'm doing some work for her right now. She's had great success with her audiobooks, and she does it all. She puts it out there, but she's as involved as you. She was at a conference and they were talking about audiobooks, and she had hired an actor who she developed a relationship with. He's done all of her books, and she has a significant investment in this. It's a lot of money that she's put out for this kind of thing. So she's hired a professional actor who is very good, and he's very sultry, and her books are romances. So that's what she needs, for the story. Right. So she was at a conference, and there were a number of writers who said, well, I'll just read my book myself. Okay. So, just to go to that point, let's just save money. I'm going to read it myself. So Sharon was ready for this, and she said, okay, no problem. Here's my book. I'll read it. And then I'm going to have a JD, who is her male reader, read it. And then she had another professional reader read it. So she reads it herself, then she hands it off to the professionals. And of course, there was no comparison.
That's exactly what I did. One of the people I auditioned for this was myself, because I read publicly a lot, and I train public speaking, so I'm a reasonably good speaker. And people kept saying, "Oh, you should read it. I've heard you read. You're great." They gave me those kinds of compliments, and I thought, well, that's nice, and thank you very much, but I'm going to check it out just to make sure. So I recorded the exact same 10 pages that I had my folks audition, and it was undeniable that they were better. And on top of that, I mean, it was shocking how much better they were. And then on top of that, it took me 4 times as long to record the same passage as it took Monica to record it, because she didn't flub as often, because she's a trained actor. Plus, you should have seen the homework she did. She would come in with the pages. She printed out the pages of the book on a PDF, as opposed to the book itself. She wrote in wherever she was taking a breath. She circled certain words that she wanted to emphasize. She put so much time into it beforehand that she didn't flub in the booth the way that I did. I stammered and flubbed and ummed and messed up all kinds of words. Right. And it would have cost me a bloody fortune in studio time to have me record it as opposed to her record it. And it would not have been anywhere near as good. Now, it's not a memoir, by the way. And I would be willing, if I have short memoir pieces and stuff, I could probably and quite effectively read those. And should. If you're writing a memoir, sometimes your voice is the best one to record it with, if you're a good enough reader. But I wouldn't do it on a dramatic piece like that. I just wouldn't do it. The quality was obvious in its difference, painfully obvious.
Do you think, though, for a newbie that's got their first works out there and they like the idea of an audiobook, to have a go themselves?
I have friends and acquaintances now that I've talked with, and I've talked with other authors who've done it a whole host of ways. One woman used her laptop, got a good microphone, made her master bedroom closet or walk-in closet into her studio and put up towels and all kinds of things in there, and went in and recorded her own darn book. She downloaded a $50 software and did it herself. And I listened to the quality of her book because I was listening to hers and researching this before I chose to go the route that I did, and it was fine. I didn't think, and hers was a memoir, and it was appropriate, and it sounded like a regular person talking, but it wasn't the quality that I wanted for mine. What she said is she knew that it wasn't super stellar quality for her, but for her, having her own voice was important to her in that story, and I agree with her. For me, because of the dramatic content and comedic content in my story, I just didn't feel like I could pull it off effectively.
Do you think
so you've got to decide what works?
Well, yeah. Do you think that having the person use accents is important? I mean, for me, like if I'm reading a book and they refer to someone as being Irish, my brain doesn't swap to, like diddly diddly potatoes. It just, I just read it. It's still in my sort of head. And so when you get to people like the status of, so Ian Holm and those big actors that do audiobooks, they tend to just use their ordinary voices, and you can say to them, just read me the phone book because I'll listen to anything.
Right.
Do you think having accents in there can be a bit off-putting in some situations?
I'm sure it could if it was done to the extreme. Here's a decision I made about that. I didn't need somebody to be Meryl Streep accent perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't need somebody who could perfectly do every accent to the extreme. What I really wanted was the suggestion of each accent. And and what Monica told me also is that because frankly, I didn't even know when I wrote the book that I had so many different kinds of accents in it. I just wrote characters that I thought would be interesting. And what Monica said is, because she'd done another audiobook, she said, oh, yours was so much easier to read because I could differentiate the voices between the characters for the reader. So the subtle accent, I'm sure that if an Australian listened to Monica's Aussie accent, it wouldn't be perfect, nor would her Irish accent be perfect. And that's not really what I wanted. I wanted just how I read when I'm reading an accent is I read just enough of a hint of it that I know the character's voice in my head. And so I wanted the sensation of like a parent reading to their children. You take on the different voices in the book. It's never going to be perfect, but you're changing the witch's voice from the fairy's voice.
Yeah.
So
unless you're super tired, and then you just kind of go to the end, and then they lived happily ever after. Everybody go night.
There you go.
I'm not allowed to
But
do
so
voices.
I found that with Monica giving just a hint of each accent, a suggestion of it, that it differentiated the characters and it wasn't too over the top. As you said, I didn't need it to be extreme.
Yeah. Well, your story has a lot to it, and it rolls forward, and it's very engaging. So you don't need to really, dress it up too much, because the story itself holds together. So I think that, is the other thing. So for the romance audios, the actor who does Sharon's books will do the different voices. He can do the different accents. He doesn't go overboard, but he's got this very, whisper in your ear, sexy voice. And for the demographics, the women who are listening to that, it's like the perfect storm.
Exactly.
And it was like, this handsome man is whispering in my ear, and he signs posters for them and takes pictures with them, and they're all over it. You'd love it, Damien. It's right up your alley.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
She really found the answer. So let me ask this then. So I noticed that ACX says, hey, we'll turn your book into an audio book. You don't have to touch it. What did you find out from that?
I did a bunch of research into that, because that was one of the things that I considered.
I'm lazy.
I'm sorry?
I'm having you on the show because I'm lazy. I knew you'd be doing the work.
Well, and like the ACX has a whole menu, and like I said before, ACX, for those of you listening, is the audio arm of Amazon. I guess all roads lead to Amazon these days, no matter how much they object to that. And what ACX does is you can do a variety of things. You can do what I did, which is produce and direct it yourself, record it yourself, and send it to them, and they upload it. So I absorbed the upfront costs. I paid my actor and my studio artist. I paid them modestly. They were newbies too, and so they were willing to try it and learn, and we all learned a bit together. I did end up giving them both bonuses, though, because it took longer than we thought. But the other option is you can through ACX, they have a corral of voice artists that are in their archives, and you can click and listen to them, an arrangement with them where you can pay $0 upfront, have the person share the royalties with you, the voice artist, and guess what? ACX and Audible, they're going to get their 60% period, and the 40% is to the author. If you choose to do a royalty share with the voice artist and not pay him or her upfront, then you split the royalty. You get 20 and they get 20.
Okay.
And it goes like that. So you can record an audiobook with a professional voice artist of your choosing through ACX for no money down.
Oh,
you just give it up. You just give it up on the back end.
Sure.
You also then give up control, because that person may sit in Timbuktu and record in their home studio, and you may do audio check-ins on it now and then, but you're not sitting in the booth while they're recording it and having influence over it. So it really depends. And like I said, the other extreme was that I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I found a local studio artist who does nothing but audiobooks. She's a fabulous person. She's done wonderful and many, many books. And the quote that I got from her was that it was going to be somewhere between $16,000 and $24,000 to record the book. Well, I didn't have that laying around.
Yikes.
And that was way out of my budget.
Yeah.
If I was Hillary Clinton and I had my book and Simon & Schuster was paying for it to be done, well, then that might work for me. But that wasn't a possibility. So for me, the middle road worked better. I didn't want to relinquish all control and do it for free, for no money down. And I didn't want to pay $15,000 to $24,000. So I found the middle there. And I set a budget of $2,500.
Okay.
And that's what I did it for.
So next time round, like some people have done some interesting things when it comes to audiobooks, where they'll record the audiobook while they're writing it. Is that something that? Yeah, I've mentioned him on the show before, but his name's slipped me now. Scott Sigler, I think, did that. He was reading it himself, mind you. Like, he'd write a chapter and then basically swing to another screen and record it and then pump it out as a podcast.
Wow.
Is that something, now that you've been through this, do you think you might play with the format a bit and try strange things by saying, hey, come on, let's get together and I've just written half a book, let's do it, and then we'll see where it takes us, sort of thing?
I don't know if I would do that, because I'd be afraid that then when I wrote the second half of the book, I'd want to go back into the first part and change something in the editing process. If I changed somebody's name or decided to delete a character or something, then they're still stuck in the first 3 chapters. I wouldn't know how to. That's sort of not how my writing process works. But I would. But I now that I've done this once, I am more open to doing a few things differently. I am more open to, for example, I'm writing a series of memoir pieces that are going to be in a collection, and I would record those, and I might even experiment with recording them on my own.
Oh yeah.
Now that I know a bit about the process that I wouldn't have done before, it would certainly all of that, but I don't think I'd go all the way to the suggestion that your author friend has made. I don't think I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to do an audiobook, but I don't think I'm too dry, I think, the way my voice is. I mean, I read out, there's a YouTube video of me doing a kid's book, and that seemed to get some good reviews, but then there's always a couple that would say, you weren't lively enough. Children's books are meant to be lively. And I think, and you sort of touched on that before, when you're reading to your kids, you put the accents on. I'm not allowed to in this house. So I've tried, like if I'm reading to the boy and I don't know, something comes up and I'll start putting on a grand voice. I got slapped by my child the other day. He says, "Stop it." And I went, "Why?" He goes, "Just read the book, Dad." And I went, all right. So I just read it.
You're doing it a bit too over the top for his tastes.
It wasn't really over the top, but yeah, I thought, well, I was getting into it and trying to get him excited about it. But then, yeah, and he doesn't take kindly either to put his name in the book. So we were reading Mr. Messy, but I changed it to Mr. Julian. And he was just slapping me going,
not good, huh?
"I'm not messy." And I just looked at his room and went, right, so this is tidy, is it?
Well, now, at the same time, though, if you have a voice that you're calling more dry, which I'm finding animated in this conversation, but if you think of yourself as having a drier sense of humor, you'd be a perfect fit perhaps for a book that's written with that tone. I listened, for example, one of the very skilled voice artists I auditioned, who was a terrific voice artist, her voice was too cartoonish for mine. She had great silly voices and animated voices, and she could do all those sounds that you hear in cartoons. That wasn't what my story needed at all. I needed somebody with a rich, resonant, steady tone. So your voice might be just perfect for a book that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit ironic.
Yeah,
it might just perfect for that.
Definitely not romance, because I'd probably they'd send the police around.
Well, they'd have to stop for all the gagging noises that you're making in between, right?
Yeah, that's right. But you can put the noise gate over that, and that'll be all right.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. But then maybe we can do a romance that's not supposed to be serious, and then you can read that. But you have to have. I admire actors who can read some, really get into what they're doing, and they may be doing the silliest thing, but they have to really believe that pirates are coming over the hill, and they have to defend the girl, and you start really deconstructing that, and you think, what, that's a really hard job.
Well, and just like I sort of felt about it the same way I feel about writing. Catherine, you've probably had this happen. Here you're a published author, you've got multiple books out there, and I've got a couple of books, and people will meet you at a cocktail party and they'll say, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a writer." "Oh, do you have a book out?" "Yes, I do." "Oh," and they instantly say, "Well, I have a book idea. I should write that." They've never taken one class. They don't respect the craft at all. They just think you've knocked it out as if it's nothing. And I felt the same way about the voice thing. Is when people said, "Oh, Betsy, you ought to read it," I thought, that's not very respectful of the craft of acting. Those people put years into learning that and mastering it and mastering their voices and their intonation and their inflection, all of that. And I felt like I was being disrespectful if I thought I could do it as well as she could. Plus, one thing that was really exciting, and Damien, this is kind of back to what you were saying, there were a couple of times when Monica was reading a particularly moving section of the story, and we had to start because she got tearful.
Oh.
And I was really touched by that. And here she'd read it many times, but in acting it, she felt it. in a very unique way. And
that's wonderful.
it was lovely. And of course, you don't want your voice artist weeping on the recording, but the sense of throatiness that came out and the sense of emotion that came out when she was affected by the story added that to it. It was much more like a performance than a reading.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you keep outtakes?
Well, there was one funny one I have to tell you. I'm a little embarrassed to say this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get a little punchy and silly when you're recording and it's late and you're tired and all of that. And there was one particularly dramatic, there's a very dark moment in the story that's very, very dark that I will not spoil for you by saying it, but let's just say it's very upsetting. And it's the end, it's where the chapter ends. And Monica had just delivered this very dramatic moment and paused for a good length of time. And then she did net, to kind of break the silence, break the mood a little bit. And we laughed.
Yeah.
Well, on the final edit, when Adam sent me the whole thing and I listened through it before we sent it to ACX, he hadn't pulled out that net. It was still in there. And I thought, oh my gosh, if that had gone out like that, I would just die of mortification.
Yeah, well, there would have been a lot of free promo on that.
Right. Or I've gotten sued by Warner Brothers for copyright infringement of a tune or something.
Right, for the tune that's probably deeply protected by a phalanx of lawyers. Exactly. Oh, that's so funny. But that's
so I did keep mistakes, but we did remove that last one right before the last send.
Yeah, right before the last thing.
Yeah, been there, done that. That's how 1 o'clock in the morning. Bands like the one I was in end up doing cover versions of things like My Sharona, but with certainly different lyrics, put it that way, and they never see the light of day. So yeah, no, I think it's a cool thing. I'm thinking now that Catherine and I should do a very short audio book, a romance thing, and I can do all the female voices. We can switch it up a bit.
There you go.
So
that would be good.
Transvestite Trevor. That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. We could definitely do that. Or I might just have you do the first chapter of Future Girls and you go from there. I might even ask you to do that on our launch on December 5th.
Yeah, well, maybe. It depends on how many books you actually want to sell.
Maybe more than 2.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about promotion for you on that day, not let's see how I can kill my career in a 45-minute block.
Well, it would be efficient, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I'm happy if you would like for me to just press record and I can sit here and, I don't know, write, and you can just talk, and then I can come in at the end and say, cool, now your career's intact. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Because you stepped out of it. But I might look at, for me, Betsy, I don't have the upfront, budget, because I'm also going to budget for a book trailer, and I might look into the ACX offer, and you can always just see what happens.
Well, I met one colleague at a writing conference, and she found the voice artist that she did her first book, and she was doing a series, not unlike what you do in a way.
Yeah,
she was doing a series, and she loved the product so much that she's in for good. Now she hires that same one. They do. Yeah. She does a no money down. They do equal royalty share, 50-50 of the 40% that ACX lets you keep. And she's happy as a clam because she loves the quality, and she also has grown to be dear friends with this voice artist and likes to support her efforts and feels like, gosh, she's willing to invest 30 or 40 hours at her own risk on behalf of my book. So why wouldn't you share those profits with her?
Oh yeah. It would definitely be shared. Sharon has a very good relationship with her voice, JD Hart, and they do a lot of co-promotion. They speak together. So I definitely think that there's a relationship, because these are your words, and someone is bringing a whole different life to them, going back to when we first started talking about this. And I agree with you, you want to, not only respect that, but you create a relationship. It already is there. You might as well go the next route and say, okay, do my next book, come to this conference with me, come to my Facebook party, let's really make this a group effort.
and frankly, I became dear friends with these people, and I care a lot about them. So they became collaborators much more than people that I'd hired. It never felt that way.
Well, it's up at audible.com, and we're signed up with Audible. So if anyone does want to check out Betsy's book, Fire and Water, you just have to go to audibletrial.com/newbiewriters, and if you sign up, you get it for free. Probably shouldn't say that. Pay for it.
Sorry about that, Betsy.
Sorry about that, Betsy. Can we play a little bit? I've got some here.
Oh, let's do that.
All right.
Sure.
Let's listen.
Without explanation, Jake pulled his car into a beachfront parking lot. Thick crowds milled around the beach. "I want you to see something," he said. He pulled a down Parker from his back seat and offered it to me. Stepping out of the car, I found myself following throngs of people who were gathering into crowds along the beach. My eyes watered from the wind and cold. The first group formed a circle. I eased myself in among them, only to see a winding 10-foot round gully in the sand. Deep inside was a sculpted circular river formed of a delicate web of icicles. Icicles in San Francisco. Onlookers snapped photographs. They murmured and pointed, wearing wonder on their...
Very cool.
Dun, dun.
Yeah.
There was a little more sound variability just because of our broadcast on Skype than there is in the actual audiobook, but that's the wonderful sound of Monica McKee's voice.
Yeah, no, it's because I was playing it through the Audible website, and let's be honest, Australian internet is shit, and I currently have two people in Skype, Google Hangout, and Audible trying to play audio. So that's good. But no, that sounded all right.
Yeah, very fun.
So there you go.
Well, Betsy, what kind of, tell us where we can find Fire and Water. Obviously, go to Audible. You can get a free download if you do it through Newbie Writers. Where else can we find you and your book?
You can certainly find it on if you want to buy a one-off, you can buy it via either iTunes or Amazon. If you choose to join audible.com, which is sort of like a Netflix kind of a thing where you pay a monthly fee and then you get a book a month or 2 books a month, depending on which level in which you invest, you can actually get Fire and Water for free, and then get your next month's book at a discount from what you would pay on Amazon. So you can find it in a variety of places like that.
Very cool. Well worth it. It was an engrossing novel. It was very, very cool to read. So I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on. Stick around. We've got a couple of things to do.
Thank you for having me, Damien. Thanks, Catherine.
Oh, our pleasure. I was just you brought you brought clarity to this, and this isn't the last, of course, that we'll talk about audio books. They're really hot. They're doing really well. So authors need to look at this. So I wanted to bring it up.
Yes. Well, should we do a prompt?
Yes. So, as everybody knows, it's National Novel Writing Month.
It is.
November. NaNoWrite more. And what would you write? Let's just pretend you're not trying to write 50,000 words this month. What would you write if you were going to write for a solid month? So, pretend for a minute you were going to actually do National Novel Writing Month. What kind of things appeal to you? Even if you don't want to do it, what would you do? Is there something that you love? Is there a subject that you're passionate about? Write for just a few minutes about what you'd write about.
Yeah. What about you, Betsy? What would you write about?
Well, I am actually doing NaNoWriMo. So I am writing I'm cheating a tiny bit, though, because I'm not really writing a novel. I'm writing a nonfiction book. And that is, I figure, well, it's my nano. I'll do it the way I want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a book called Public Speaking for Writers and Other Introverts.
I'll buy that.
And when that book is done, we'll have you back on and we'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Take my money. I don't know. I'd probably do medieval fantasy and complaints.
Medieval fantasies and complaints?
Yeah. Because you got to break it up a bit, You don't want to get too engrossed in high fantasy. You want to write the odd complaint letter. I love complaint letters.
Maybe you should do a compendium of complaint letters for normal, everyday annoyances.
Yeah. And
except set in the Middle Ages.
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be
Or
strange,
The
wouldn't it?
suggestion box at the castle.
You get all the peasants learning how to use terms like "this is highly unacceptable,"
Right.
when most peasants couldn't read or write. That's why they were peasants. But anyway,
That's why they were peasants.
yeah, I don't know. There's something a little bit like passive aggressive about writing complaint letters
Oh yeah.
that I
There's
like.
most definitely something passive aggressive about it. But that's why they're fun, and the way that they're worded can be very interesting and fun.
I consider them drive-bys.
Yes.
Yes.
It's like a drive-by insult.
Well, the last email I sent to a supplier was, "This is unacceptable. Who can I complain to that's not yourself?"
Did they pass you along very quickly?
Well, the response was, "I'm not really sure, Damien." I said, "Well, how about you get onto that?" Like, I am a tolerant person, but I said I have my limits, and if you pull the wool over my eyes, smackdown. Anyway, let's do a word of the week.
Let's do a word of the week.
Now, word of the week, you grabbed this from a word a day with
Yes, I did.
Garg, and the word is perniency. Perniency. Taking or receiving of rent, profit, etc. That sounds like a lawyer word. I don't like that word.
Doesn't that sound like kind of a lawyerly thing?
Yeah. Or someone that would be on TV for they owned a property that actually had a drug lab in it, and their defendant was using the term perniency.
Just to make them sound smarter and not so druggy.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the beauty of language.
Yes. Speaking of which, we'll do shout outs in a minute, but good shout out to the drummer from AC/DC, keeping Australia at the forefront of news. Got arrested for conspiring to kill 2 people. Nice work, you idiot. All right. But yeah, probably because of perniency, the receiving of rent,
Receiving of it.
and hit money. All right, let's do a tortured sentence. Next time, don't put the wrong faces on the right slab. Tortured sentences. So I had the audio engineer for Betsy's book send that in. Apparently that's how they did the last few chapters. Betsy yelling at the...
Because they wanted it to be really dramatic.
Yeah, that's right. We need more death in this scene.
Yeah, that's right. To get people on the edge of their seats.
Yeah, I remember working with a guy in a band, and he was doing a vocal warm-up, and he said, "Can you turn the evil knob up, please?" I can't find that. Anyway, this tortured sentence, obviously from one of your students, I take it.
Yep.
All right, so this one says...
Give it a try.
Because I haven't read this. So, then for some reason, the Indians started leaving. What caused this? Decided to... Hang on. Let me back up a minute. It doesn't even make... I can't even read it properly.
Tortured sentences are hard to read.
They are.
Yep.
Then for some reason, the Indians started leaving. What caused this? Decided to leave this place of paradise. The country has changed so much with the population, the government. Curse the
It's
government.
almost like a haiku, but not.
So for some reason, the Indians started leaving. Now, I'm not that up
Yeah,
on
I'm
US
sure death
history.
and smallpox and disease had nothing to do with that decision.
Yeah, and, invasion. But that's fine.
Invasion, land grabs, the usual.
Yeah, the usual. We go through it here in Australia.
Yeah, so we have in common.
Yeah, except we can't give them casinos. So.
See, we're hoping this is going to make them feel better, but so far I'm not convinced.
No, I'm not convinced either. All right. Well, that was just woeful. Now,
Yes.
shout outs. Betsy, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Oh my, hadn't thought about that.
Oh, you've been on here before. You know how it works.
I forgot that part.
Good.
Well, I will. I mean, since we've been talking about my audiobook, I'd like to give a shout out to the artists that helped me make it happen. Make it happen. Monica McKee, the fabulous voice artist, and Adam Sullivan of Great Magnet Music in Santa Rosa, California.
There you
Great
go.
Magnet, Great Magnet Studios, excuse me.
Well, you've got to get it right, otherwise people will be knocking on the wrong door. All right. Is there anyone you want to give?
People and fabulous artists.
Is there anyone you want to give
Cool.
a shout out to, Catherine?
I'm good right now. Future
you're not.
Girls is coming up, and I'm going to be shouting out that all the time, but that's about it.
Yes, and hopefully you get over your cold quickly.
I know. Sorry about that.
I want to give a shout out to my wife. It's her birthday today. So
Oh,
happy birthday.
what are you doing for today?
We went out last night to a restaurant. That was good. Ate way too much. And then you go out and someone came into the restaurant that I used to work with. It was a real pain in the neck. But luckily we were finishing up so we could leave. So you can't relax them when they're like literally the table next to you being in
Yeah, and they
pain.
keep leaning over and talking to you, and you don't really want to talk to them. You want time for yourself.
No, he looked at me, but I just sort of went, I've got to go. See ya.
See ya.
Yes, and now we're going to the boy was down at my mother's place last night, and so we're going to go pick him up today and do that. And then tomorrow, family function at a winery.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
I'm always up for something. Any function in a winery makes me
Of
happy.
course you are. Anyway. So, yes, next week, who have we got on? Have we got anyone on?
Next week, we're going to talk about National Novel Writing Month, how to get through the sloppy middle of your 50,000 words.
Yeah, or in my case, start them.
Or start them. We're going to have a whole conversation about National Novel Writing Month because I think it's like the best invention.
Right. I think it is a good invention if I could be bothered.
So we'll have something to discuss, won't we?
That's right. But at least this time round, I'm upfront saying I'm not doing it. Whereas last year I was like, yeah, I might try it. And you kept asking me, how you going? I'm like, yeah, fine. Not doing it. So anyway. All right. Well, that'll do it. So until next week. We'll see
Till
you
next
then.
week.
Your book starts here on the Newbie Writers Podcast.